Hi, and good evening, everyone. My name is Albert, and this is Vlogs About Nothing. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy Tuesday to join me. I really do appreciate it. Tonight, we're talking about food banks and workplace safety. So, let's start out by talking about food banks. And so, here's the thing, you've probably read some news recently, and if you haven't, maybe it's because you don't, read news or listen to it or whatever. But I dare say that a lot of us do, a lot more of us than we'd like to admit, because a lot of the time it's just kind of there on our screen, and just from scrolling through the endless scroll, we kind of jump on some info and stuff. But I feel like right now a trendy topic on some of these open-ended search engine sites when you open the page for their platform is sort of like the idea that the federal government is doing the private community a disservice by discontinuing to fund food banks. And I want to kind of evaluate that. And while in no way would I ever agree with anything this current government is doing, I just want to point out that I think it's kind of weird that we live in a world where we have to talk about whether or not the federal government is even willing or has the option to donate to 501c3 nonprofit corporations that function as a middleman to get people and communities the food that they need. I mean, it just sounds kind of weird, because if people made enough money to live, then they wouldn't need to go to the food bank. There would be no need to have another party involved in the adequate and efficient distribution in what is arguably just simply a human right. Moreover, as it is a necessity that is required to live and produce for whatever sort of authoritarian kind of, you know, um, corrupt government is going on at that current point in the timeline. And I really feel like these things are important, because I'm not interested in funding food banks. Follow me. Because I'm more interested in universal basic income, and maybe even the idea that UBI doesn't include food stamps, which have historically been how a lot of people have been feeding themselves for literal, sometimes decades. And I know that you might be thinking that it's because they choose to live off of a couple $100s a month, in food so that they can get by or whatever because they're lazy, but that's just not the case. The minimum wage hasn't been raised in close to 4 decades. Things are way more expensive than they've ever been. Economic inequality is at a point that is quite arguably put us in a place that I've stated for years now on the record, and now more boomer economists are getting around to the idea of a gilded age. And I feel like a gilded age is real nice for a handful of people. And for the people that are just below them, it might not be so bad too. But for everyone else, it's absolute hell on earth. And I just feel like we don't need to have other places look out for our best interests when in fact they get the money to look out for our best interests by the very people who should just be providing us with the things we need to fulfill our best interests. I just, why? It's expensive. It's not as efficient as just either giving people more money to spend on their food stamps, or just by simply cutting them a paycheck so that they can involve themselves in this Ponzi like scheme that we call Western society or current day America. I'm just thinking to myself that I don't think that in any way, shape, or form food banks in and of themselves should be needed in a world where, not just in theory but in reality, no one should be hungry. There could literally be not a single hungry person on the surface of this planet right now, and yet we are all guilty of knowing that literally billions of people are in fact hungry. And in fact, a couple of those billions of people, moreover, are unalived as a result of their hunger, because they die of starvation every single second of every single day. I think that's kind of weird because, again, we have the resources, we know what is right, we know what is wrong, and yet we still continue to support a kind of system that doesn't allow for there to be any growth within the actual populace and with like amongst the actual constituents that are, I thought, by a democratic definition, a part of and the actual political way the world works. And it just doesn't work that way. Only a select few of people benefit. And so food banks are weird, all right? Let's talk about workplace safety. There's a link in the description to both of these topics that I'm talking about tonight. And I obviously can't get into too much detail with like 10 to 12 minutes, but I'd like to touch on a couple, And so workplace safety is really important. Did you guys know that more people, and by more people, I mean twice as many people, suffer fatal injuries while they are on the job at an Amazon distribution warehouse or while they're in the field delivering Amazon products to us every single day than places that have been around for longer than that and are of equal size, just namely Walmart, which is probably the only one to compete with something like that as it concerns volume of business and where it sits on the safety scale of how the warehouse fulfillment people are told to be safe and all of these things, and more importantly, whether or not it's actually enforced, right? Because a lot of the times we hear too many stories of how Amazon employees get paid way too little to begin with, and that might be some kind of natural motivation to not want to go above and beyond your job duty because you're not getting paid to do that. But it doesn't turn into that because Amazon needs to pay their people more, obviously, and people die working at Amazon, and then they are not allowed to seek damages for the loss of life through court or through litigation because of different kinds of arbitration or different kinds of shady agreements that Amazon has set up with third-party delivery services that make it so that if something happens to the people that are actually working for Amazon, but de facto we're working for Amazon, but technically aren't because they're independent contractors or whatever. So it's weird. And it's weird that Amazon isn't unionized. And I think that it's weird that we even have a question as to whether or not unions are welcome in big and large private or publicly traded companies. I mean, safety is something that should not be welcome. Oversight and government regulation are not something that are optional. Again, whether or not we like to admit it, it's something that happens every single day with the lack of enforcement as it is doing the right thing. And I just feel like the right thing to do is to protect workers and to make sure that places like Amazon, which by every definition of the word are in fact not entitled or we don't owe them anything, they are in fact privileged companies. They have the privilege of conducting business within our borders. These are not rights. Walmart doesn't have a constitutional right to operate. Neither does Amazon. Not in and of itself, and you know what I mean. I'm just saying that those aren't the kinds, the government was not made, well, I guess one could argue, but on the surface of things, the government was not entirely made for and comprised by corporate sort of definitive terms that lead us to all of these different bureaucratic arguments when in fact the government is the one in charge. And I just feel like the government needs to stop accepting bribes from places like Amazon so that the people that work for these places can actually unionize. And I think that's the only appropriate third party welcome in any sort of situation where the government and the private constituent is involved, because that involves a lot more like a better practice of you having your job and moreover your life every time and every day when you come back home from work. It's a silly thing to argue in the modern day whether or not unions should be welcome in these large companies. Again, it's a fool's argument. They spend more money on making sure unions do not come into these places than they do on wage increases, than they do on anything else, on product development, on trying to make something better that they've classically or historically just made worse. And this is industry wide, with the exception of Walmart. Walmart seems to have been able to fly under the radar, but honestly, Walmart should have been unionized 30 years ago, too. So, I mean, yes, while Walmart might get the pass, they get the pass because in the real world, it's hard to beat a reality in which some of us are absolutely dependent upon Walmart, as if Walmart didn't exist, we might not be sure as to what we're eating. Not myself included, just like hundreds of thousands, probably millions of other people out there. And so, yeah, it's kind of a big deal. And Amazon's kind of like a convenience. And if Amazon disappeared tomorrow, only people that get things delivered to their home would notice. And I'm sure at some point shortly thereafter, the ones with half a brain would just be okay with not accepting packages anymore from a place that didn't really provide them with any sort of substantiative kind of thing unless they were utilizing those services to deliver goods that they actually used every day, like food and stuff. And so I just think that people just always do that in brick and mortar places, and Amazon will never be Walmart. And anyways, people need to really get a focus on how dangerous it is to work at Amazon, and why it is absolutely necessary for the government to intervene, and for OSHA workers and OSHA regulators to stop being corrupted and bribed by the very individuals who are needed to be there, so that the people that are getting those bribes are like being held responsible and accountable for the oversight of the operations at these warehouses. It's a big deal. It's a big responsibility. And when things happen, people need to be held accountable. And moreover, if a corporation is legally defined as a person, well then, last time I checked, any type of person is part of a group of larger, it's called like people or whatever. Anyways, I hope that you guys have a really good night. Thank you for watching my show. My name is Albert. This was Vlogs About Nothing. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.